Okay, let's get rolling. Hi, everyone. My name is Christian S. I'm the chair of BOMA's QBT committee. Thanks everyone for joining us for our April QBT session, the final 5% mastering project closeouts. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. We respect the land and are grateful for the privilege of living, working, and sharing these lands with the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you all to turn your phones to silent. For those of you joining us via Zoom today, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen for any questions you may have. We'll address questions as they come in and have time set aside for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Please also use the chat icon if you require technical assistance. And I think we're taking questions throughout the presentation as well. So if anyone has a question, put your hand up and answer those. So on to the session. I'd like to introduce our speakers today, Heinrich Skoman and Steve Bailey, both of WCP Building Renewal. Heinrich is a seasoned construction professional with over 20 years of industry experience. Throughout his career, he has successfully delivered over 4,500 projects, ranging from large-scale building renewals to complex restoration work. Heinrich's passionate about delivering seamless, on-time project completion and sharing practical strategies to help industry professionals navigate common challenges. Steve brings over 10 years of experience in business development and client service with a strong focus on building lasting relationships and delivering value to clients. Thanks for being here today. I'll pass it off to you guys.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Chris. And also thank you to BOMA for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. Just in my time in the industry, BOMA's done such a great job just facilitating events, bringing people together. You guys do some incredible work, and yeah, an honor to be here. My name is Steven, guys. We're going to have probably about the next hour or so together, and just one quick piece of housekeeping. It's midweek. It's on a Wednesday. I understand you guys are busy, so if you have a call come in or anything like that, if you need to leave the room for any reason, you're not being rude, I promise. So yeah, please don't feel like you're interrupting at all. So I'll take you guys through just a quick, this is our title slide, but that's what I was just speaking to. So I'll take you guys through a quick agenda for today's session. So we're going to go through and do a brief introduction to WCP Building Renewal and our services. And then I'm going to show you guys some real world applications of where we've done some recent case studies. Those first two points, we're going to not linger on and spend too much time with. As I say, this is not really a dog and pony show to just show us and what we do. We want to focus on the majority of our time on the core piece of the content, which is going to be number 3, and why you guys are here, which is going to be mastering project closeouts and that final 5%. So I should mention this series is a 3-part series we've developed, and it kind of takes you through, you've got a project, it needs to go to tender, contractor selection processes. So it's actually called How to Select the Right Contractor. That would be part 1. Part 2 is then, okay, great, we've got our contractor, project is underway. Now I need to be doing and facilitating proper project management procedures as it relates to, property professionals like you guys. That's part 2. And then part 3, which is the final 5%, and just making sure we're kind of closing that project out effectively. So we're going to spend some time reviewing part 1 and part 2, but I should note those presentations themselves can be anywhere from about 40 to 50 minutes. So we're going to glide through that relatively quickly. This session is designed to be interactive. So as questions come up, just feel free to raise your hand and we'll address things as it go. And I know Chris mentioned, just to everybody that's joining us on Zoom, Kiyomi's going to be managing the chat box there. So yeah, if things come up, please answer, or please ask and we'll provide that answer. But we will have a dedicated time towards the end for Q&A. Chris did a phenomenal job introducing us. I don't know that this slide needs to be lingered on anymore, but Heinrich Skoman, he's our managing partner. As Chris mentioned, over 20 years of experience in the industry, and he did say 4,500 projects. That's gone up even since I've sent that blurb to Chris. So 4,500 and counting. And then I'm Steven, I'm the business development manager. So quick show of hands. This is sometimes a light bulb moment, but quick show of hands. Who's done a project with Wolfgang Commercial Painters in the room, or who's familiar with that name, Wolfgang Commercial Painters? That's great.
5% to go.
There you go. So we do get questions about our name quite a bit, WCP and what that means. I know it's not WCB. And when I say that at events like at BOMA, sometimes people walk away from me and I don't understand why, but WCP really is just, it's an acronym for Wolfgang Commercial Painters. It's a tribute to our 20+ years in business. We recently went through a rebrand just last February, so it's been over a year now, because Wolfgang Commercial Painters kind of pigeonholed us into just one service when our services were much more holistic. You also might be wondering, what is building renewal? And that's a great question, because building renewal, restoration, these terms can be somewhat broad sometimes, but the way we classify building renewal, high and low rise exterior building restorations, as well as interior common area remodels. So in terms of a bit more of an in-depth look at what our services are as it relates to exterior services, as you can see, we do concrete, wood, metal restoration. We still do exterior commercial painting. That is another question we get quite a bit. Do you guys still do painting? Yes, it's still one of our core services. Membranes, we do membranes of all kinds, whether it's repair, application, membranes of all kinds. Sealants and caulking, waterproofing, given we're in Vancouver, waterproofing is definitely a service that's called upon quite a bit. Brick repointing, and then inspections. Oftentimes, a lot of these projects began with a thorough inspection. So that's absolutely a service that we provide. And then yes, interior services. We do provide interior services. Another question we get quite a bit. So we do interior common areas. So drywall, texture repairs, interior commercial painting, finished carpentry, wall coverings and protection, as well as design consultations. And sometimes I find it's actually easier to just note what we don't provide than the services we do. As I said, restoration is kind of a broad topic, but we don't do new construction. We're not in disaster restoration as it relates to fire and flood, and we don't do windows and roofing installation. Okay, very briefly, as I mentioned, now we're going to just take you through a couple case studies. These are just recent projects, some marquee projects for us. First one being Grand Villa Casino. You guys probably recognize this one just off Highway 1. It's kind of a landmark now over there in Burnaby. Might be holding on to some money for you guys for a brief time, I'm not sure. But so we actually did, we could do a full hour presentation on the case study that we made for this project. We did full exterior renovations, and in fact, it actually took a lot of unique approaches for our clients to make sure not only we were able to execute the entire project, but in the process, we ended up saving them, at least a couple $1 million just with some unique approaches. As you can see, the tower elevation, which is the hotel piece, it's definitely got a unique design, which brought up a couple of challenges. And actually, we've submitted this project for a BOMA award this year. So Kiyomi, just keep that in mind. But
I'm not the judge.
But you know the judge. So Campbell Heights. I don't know, is anybody familiar with Campbell Heights? Massive industrial park located in South Surrey. Hundreds, like millions of square footage of warehousing space, 2-story tilt-up concrete buildings, literally as far as the eye can see. So we actually just completed restoring 4 of these buildings, massive tenants in these as well, Amazon being one of them. But these buildings are not old. They're actually only about 3.5 years old. Not to get into it again, it's a bit more of an in-depth case study, but there was substantial failure at concrete due to phosphorescence. So we had to come in, grind it all down, repaint. There was also some metal cladding that needed to be refinished here, but these buildings look great. Actually, one of my favorite things about this, it's so large that our crews actually brought out their pedal bikes. Otherwise, they were putting on about 30,000 steps per day, just walking between the different warehouses. So our guys were riding around on their bikes, which I thought was pretty funny. So this is the Deborah. This one was done for a long standing client of ours. They're a private family private holdings company. They own several properties in and around Vancouver. This one is located over on the west end. This one's quite close to us because this was actually our first full holistic building renewal project, and actually kind of sparked the idea for us to start going towards more holistic building renewal services and evidently change our name. When we initially went to this property, they wanted us just to do exterior paint on it. However, there was concrete failure throughout. Every single deck needed repairs. The railings needed to be replaced. So this quickly became quite a large project. This one was actually done in 6 months. So yeah, great one there. That building still looks great as well. So this is an interior project, and I like showcasing this one just because it's an example of some interior work that we do. But this was done for 604 Real Estate, Spring Hill Place. This one's located over in North Vancouver, 14-story residential building. Yeah, we did every single floor, common area. We did drywall repair, interior painting, finished carpentry. We also did a design consultation, but I should note I'm going to use the laser pointer. The elevator doors you see, that was not our suggestion to keep that, but they wanted to keep a piece of the building from when it was in the 70s, or when it was built, which I think was in the 70s. So anyways, everything looks great. Elevator doors, not so much, but that's okay. So we do these presentations quite often, and I found the impact is when we leave, okay, these guys are only interested in large scale projects, which is absolutely not true. We do smaller maintenance projects, and we do them quite frequently as well. A good example of that, we had a new client come to us with a project that was, I think, about a $10,000 scope. We executed that with them. It went great. The next week, they came to us with about a $3 million project, and now we're assessing that and going through that with them. So just kind of shows you the range in which that we're able to operate, whether it's small maintenance projects, right up to a project like the Grand Villa Casino, and kind of everything in between. Okay, so I know that was a little bit of rapid fire, but like I said, I wanted to get through that. I think it's important you're acquainted with us and our services. So now I'm going to pass things off to Heinrich. He's going to take us through some of the key outcomes from the presentation today. Heinrich, go for it.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, well, we'll start with, out of curiosity, a bit of a question. So a little raise of hands here. On the project closeout front, who's had a project not close so well? Maybe a little bit sideways. Raise your hand. Yeah. Oh, that was great. It's like a few at first, and then just more started to slowly rise there. So yeah, same with us. It happens, especially when you're doing thousands of projects. It's bound to happen, right? And that's what this presentation is all about. As I was walking around at the beginning, I was saying, one of the things I like to dive into, if there's one thing you come away with that you can apply, meaningfully apply, take that, zone out afterwards, whatever, and just like, this is the thing that I'm going to do, right? So I'd encourage you to take that one thing and get out there and apply it, if it resonates. Okay, so what are we going to cover today in the project closeout? You can see a few key pieces that we're going to dive into. For one, how to prepare for a seamless project close. So, prep is king in life in so many ways, and preparation is key here. So we're going to dive into the 2 key steps that need to be taken to ensure a project closes effectively. So we'll start there. Then we're going to dive into the key steps. There's 4 key steps to, make sure you leverage, to ensure a project closes effectively. And I will say, these can be applied. We were talking, of course, we're a WCB building renewal. This can be applied to anything on the contracting side, so whether this is a window re project, whether this is general contracting, whether this is window washing, even, like it runs the gamut. You can apply these basic steps and use them effectively here, right? And that final piece there, or second to final, how to pull a project out of the fire. So, feel like you do everything right, everything goes great, and despite that, something goes sideways. What can you do? We'll speak to that and dive into that, okay? And then throughout the way, there's going to be some tools and templates that you can leverage. We'll make sure that you get a copy of those and get those sent out to you. Please use them, abuse them. They'll have WCP logos, but feel free to get rid of those, or not, up to you. You want to keep them in there, no problem. but leverage those tools and templates. They're really handy and they're the kind of thing that you can use out there on your projects. That's what this is all about. All right, let's jump in, right? So preparing for a seamless job close. So a couple key steps in this path, right? And as Stephen mentioned, want to reiterate these two, this is kind of like a high level summary. These are actually covered in other presentations that kind of lead up to the project close. So think of this as sort of a lightning round of the most important things that you can do prior to getting to that closing step. Okay, so one, the project tender meeting. So when does this happen? It's kind of like, when does this happen and why is it relevant to the project close? So when does this happen? It actually happens prior to a project even being awarded. So this is the time when you and all the other stakeholders come together and align on what this project is all about, right? So when we talk about stakeholders, what do we mean? Well, stakeholders are anybody that has a literal stake in the project. So that could be the contractor. It's going to be, you know, perhaps a building owner, perhaps it's a strata. So you might have council members involved. Perhaps there's an engineer that's going to come involved. Perhaps there's an architect, inspectors, whoever else is going to be involved in this, they should be there, right? They should be there at this meeting. Why? It's all about alignment at this stage. And also you can deal with any questions that pop up proactively. The alternative to this is you have a scenario where you're meeting contractors individually, you're tripling the effort on your end, right? Maybe quadrupling, depending on how many you're going through, right? When you do that, you're getting misalignments. By bringing everybody together all on the same page, it's straightforward and you deal with any questions, comments, it's like a group think and you get an aligned scope of work. We're going to talk about project specifications and how you can come up with that, right? There may be some AI tools that you can leverage there, right? But coming out of this project tender meeting, you want to have great alignment. And another key piece, you can see how contractors face-to-face, how you actually, you know, engage with them, right? How responsive they are, right? How professional they are. All really important tools to help you select the right contractor, which, as you probably all know, is a major component to making sure a project closes out effectively. You can do all the right things, but if you have the wrong contractor for the project, it's not going to go well. Right? It's just not going to go smoothly. So that's the project tender meeting. A vetting checklist. So this is going to be the first tool we're going to provide for you. This is something you can see a whole bunch of different pieces there, whether it's association memberships. Oh, BOMA. Are they involved in BOMA? A little check mark there, right? Others, certifications that may be relevant to the project at hand, right? So it depends on what the project is, but you want to make note of those. Does this contractor have those? This is going to help you select the right contractor for the project in the first place. I see pictures being taken. They will be sent out to you as well, but that's great. You know, other things like online compliance, this can sometimes be valuable and important. You know, you might immediately disqualify a contractor right off the bat if they don't have the online compliance that you need for the project at hand. Okay, so great tool. We will give it to you, leverage it. You know, this is going to help you select the right contractor or make the whole process more smooth. All right, we got up there a bit of AI. I'm going to pass it back to Stephen. Stephen's going to speak to how we could leverage AI in this stage.
Thank you. Okay. Quick show of hands, who's leveraging AI in their day-to-day, whether it's professional, personal, whatever the case might be. Okay, so that's about half the room. Personally, AI almost acts as like a personal assistant for me at my home computer setup. One screen is dedicated basically to keeping it up at all times for a variety of things, right? But leveraging it effectively not only is going to help you guys in your day-to-day, but especially for something like this. So we're talking about contractor selection very briefly. So using this tool that we just shared with you guys, and once again, we are going to be sending this to you guys. It's going to look slightly different than it does on the screen. This is just for design on a slideshow purpose, but it will look slightly different. But let's say you've either filled this out or you've provided it to the contractor to fill it out for you. It's provided back to you. Now, how are you actually going to take that document, leverage AI to make sure that you're not missing anything, right? Well, let's take a look. So this is kind of a very general prompt, right? This is condensed. You can get as intricate with these. Some of you guys who are leveraging AI every day, you guys know full well, the better the prompt, the more details I'm giving, the more information that I'm going to be getting. So the prompt we have here, I'm a property manager or building owner preparing to tender a construction project. So right away, you've prompted it to start to think exactly in the mindset that you guys want to be in. I need to create a comprehensive tender form that outlines the scope of work, contractor requirements, evaluation criteria, and submission guidelines. And then you're going to enter in your details, right? This project involves description, et cetera, whether it's concrete repair, painting of a high rise, like Heinrich said, whatever the case might be. Please generate a structured tender document. And then it's going to produce, every single thing that you guys are going to need. So I know some of you guys have been in this industry a long time. So you're like, hey, I've tendered thousands of projects. I don't really need this because I have a good process. Sometimes it's good to just leverage this because either one, it's going to confirm that for you. Like, okay, great. This is not providing me any other additional info that I'm going to need. Or two, there's going to be something that may have slipped through the cracks. So you're like, you know what? Actually, that is valuable. I do need that in my tender document to be able to then provide to the contractor. And it's going to include things like project overview and scope and some details circulating that. Contractor requirements, right? Bid submissions and evaluation, as well as key contract terms and, a variety of other things. The beauty about leveraging AI as well is after I've input my prompt, if I'm getting an answer that I'm not quite satisfied with, I can then prompt it again and be like, actually, I was hoping you'd go into a bit more detail about this, provide X, Y, and Z. And then it's going to kind of maneuver it to then produce that exact answer that you want. I should also mention, we're not AI experts by any stretch, but we have been leveraging it quite often for a variety of things. And, it's like I said, it's become almost like a personal assistant for us. So I would definitely encourage that, especially with the documents that we're sending to you guys and another one we're about to go through. Just feed it as much possible information as you can to really just help guide that answer for you. But yeah, cool. Okay, Heinrich, passing it back up to you.
Okay. Yeah, and just a fun note on the AI front. There, you might be thinking, well, wait a second, doesn't AI hallucinate from time to time? If I put some information in there, is it going to give me bad data? That's possible. It's absolutely possible. But again, if it's used effectively, i.e. as a tool to maybe help create a good specification for a project, and then you have that project tender meeting, well, that's where questions get answered. And you may have a contractor or an architect or somebody like, well, wait a second, that probably doesn't really make much sense. Great. Then that's where the specification gets adjusted. Maybe an addendum gets sent out, and fantastic. Now we've got alignment, right? So it's used as a tool, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to then be refined following that. Another really important note, and something else you can do here while we're in this kind of preparatory phase, is say you get a few different proposals. How many of you, when you're comparing proposals, does it feel like you're reading different languages? You're like, wait a second, are we even talking vaguely apples to apples? Who's experienced that before? Raise of hands. Yeah, a lot, right? It's just one of those things that can come up. AI can, and I've done it, it's fantastic. You can just put it in, it can read PDFs, whatever format it comes in, and it can just create compare these for me, please. What's aligned, what's misaligned, and you can even direct it to the things that are meaningful for you, right? So another great way to help you select a good contractor. All right. So on the next phase here, so we've dealt with the project tender meeting itself. Let's move on to, you've selected a contractor, you've used AI a little bit. Let's move in, the project is about to start. What's the most important thing you can do prior to getting to that project close to ensure that you're set up for success? The pre-production meeting. This could be called a pre-construction meeting as well, whatever you'd like to say, right? But we call it a pre-production meeting. So why is this effective? Again, similar to the project tender meeting, which happens even before the project is awarded, it's about getting alignment. So same thing, you're bringing all the stakeholders together and you're going to make sure that everybody is aligned on a few key things. So first off, scope of work, right? You ideally have that already aligned. You've probably signed a proposal or submitted a PO, but you do want to make sure that there's good alignment on what the scope of work is. You'd be surprised how many times things can pop up where it's like, wait a second, is this elevation included? What are we talking about here? Well, this is the time, if it didn't get caught previously, to make sure there's alignment there. In addition to that, maybe there's project challenges that haven't come up previously. Maybe you're looking at a given elevation and there's power lines, right? And that elevation needs to be dealt with, whether it's a roofing project or a window repair project or what have you. Well, how is that going to be addressed? How is that going to be dealt with, right? You can deal with that there. Another major piece that's important is, what does communication look like on this project? You've probably experienced where maybe even you go through this process, but there's not clarity in how communication is going to happen. That's a problem. Who's going to communicate? What are the roles associated with communication, right? Make sure those are clearly documented. And what does the communication process look like? When are we going to get updates? Who's going to be sending those updates for this project? Ensure that's documented and you're on the path to success, right? So really important in that pre-production phase. And finally, any special considerations, any other factors, like if you have unique tenants, right? I'm sure many of you do. You're like, my tenants have particular needs. Well, let's speak to those now and make sure they're addressed and planned for. This is also where you deal with logistical issues, like staging areas, if there's a lot of equipment, keys, fobs, all those details. The key piece is that everybody is involved and on the same page, right? Coming out of that, there's a summary. This is ideal. There's a summary. Somebody's taking minutes. We do that in meetings for a reason. And those minutes are distributed to everybody. So it's one thing to hear it and align on it. It's another thing to send it out and document it. So that is the second phase. And of course, another tool that we'll provide for you is a real world example of this, right? Where you can actually leverage. So same thing, we're going to send this out to you, but it's just a guideline for these. And whether you're involved in these pre-production meetings or not, you might be asking, well, wait, when should I be involved and when shouldn't I be involved? Well, if it's a larger project, and what does large mean? Well, that's, depends. But if it's probably a $20,000 project up into the millions, whatever the scope of work, whatever the trade, having a meeting like this is probably a really good idea, right? But even if you're not directly involved in it, make sure that whoever's going to be the main point of contact, right, on your end, does at least guide or follow this. Or just give it to the contractor, be like, hey, I want this information coming out of this meeting so that I'm aligned and we're all on the same page, right? And you can adapt it accordingly. Maybe use AI. So yeah, just a few of the tools that you can see there. Scheduling review and a bunch of them we spoke to, notices and tenant concerns, material approval plan. If there's expensive or unique materials, you can leverage all of that, right? So a great tool that can be provided. Okay, boom. Pitfall alerts, right? So we're going to have a few of these going throughout the project on things that you want to avoid, keep heads up. We sometimes call them red flags, but this is clearly yellow. So we'll yellow flag, that's fine. So here we go, right off of the bat, all stakeholders not at the tender or pre-production meeting are two major steps prior to getting into the closeout. I think this should be self-evident why this is problematic. Right? But if you do not have all the right people, what happens? There's questions down the line. There's somebody that comes in, wait a second, what's this? What's the scope of work? Who's communicating with what? It leads to problems. So just bringing everybody together, as time consuming as it can be, bringing everybody together makes a difference. So a really important thing. If there's one thing to take away, that's a powerful one right there. Just make sure all the stakeholders are involved. All right. So we've done a great tender meeting and we've selected the right contractor. We've done a great pre-production meeting and we've set things up for success. Now we're moving toward the closeout. We're feeling good. Everything's going pretty smoothly. But what do we do to make sure things go well? Well, that's this phase. That's what we're going to get into here. And we're going to start off with an exciting pitfall. And that's just right off the bat, even before the closeout starts, this can be something happening. The ownership gets involved too early. So what does that look like when an ownership gets involved too early? Well, it could be, it could be if it's a strata project that a given strata owner dives in. It could be on a commercial project where, the building manager starts getting involved with the contractor proactively, right? This can lead to problems right off the bat. Why? Why does this lead to issues? Well, it's simple. The project's not complete, right? The project's not finalized. And so if you have an owner getting involved too early, it can just make things go really sideways really quickly, right? I have a kind of a real world brief story, real world example of this where this popped up. So this was a interior renovation project. It was a strata, and things were moving along really nicely. There was a finished carpentry involved, drywall repair, texture repair, painting, common area space. But of course, you know, you have owners that have opinions, and we're going through the process. We're getting towards conclusion, and we're just about there. We had an owner who was not involved in that tender meeting, not involved in the pre-production meeting itself. Alarm bells, right? Who gets involved now saying, I'm not happy with this, right? And they, of course, are a designer, right? Because why wouldn't they be? They get involved and they're like, well, wait a second. Like, they have all sorts of opinions about how the process is going, and they want to have their words, you know, like say like, this isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working. And it derailed things for us, right? And we had a strata contact who was not willing to necessarily stand up to them. They were a forceful personality, and this immediately led to issues, right? Things immediately started to go sideways. A great example of the ownership getting involved too early, right? And actually, we'll see in the steps here, if we go through these, they can be mitigated. But one of the key things that we did, and I was managing this project directly, is that, okay, pause. Let's all meet on site. Let's all get aligned on things again and make sure we're on the same page before we proceed forward anymore. And luckily, that was able to resolve it, because we said, hey, like, let's talk about the materials that we're using on this. These were already pre-approved. Let's talk about the scope of work. This was already approved. Let's wait until we conclude on the project, and then happily, let's all get involved and move towards final walk around, right? So crucial steps, and we'll see that in our stages here. Yeah.
Say too early, but from what I'm hearing, it sounds like too late, because there weren't involved in the tender meeting, they weren't involved in the construction meeting, and everything was selected and specified, and then they come up and say, we don't like it, so like they're too late.
Yeah, so in a sense, you're right. Ideally, in that situation, this was a strata, right? So we had our strata contact or individual strata contact involved, right? And they were on one liaisoning through, everything had been aligned, but this person, this designer, hadn't been involved in that process. So yes, ideally, if you had a designer who wanted to be involved in the process, who had their opinions, ideally they were involved in those steps. That would have been the best case scenario, right? If they have opinions and they want to be there, they're involved in those steps along the way so that they can make themselves heard. They had some opinions about materials that were selected, which were already approved by Strata, right? But they said, no, I don't like these. Well, that's a problem, right? So yes, you're absolutely right. Ideally, they're involved there, right? Proactively. But because they weren't, we're saying, well, talk to Strata, right? This is what they've already approved and aligned on, right? Let us do our work, and then you can come in after the fact, right? So yes, it's one of those challenging situations where you'd want them there if they have opinions, but that's something that needs to be addressed.
You're also correct to say that when you look at the whole project holistically, they are late, right? But when speaking specifically to, okay, now we're looking at closing out the project, they're early in that particular phase, right? So that's why it says they're involved too early, not too late.
Yeah. So lots of interesting examples where this can come up, but now we're into the 4-step process, you know, and directly to your points, right? We're talking about step 1 is contractor declares the project is ready for review, right? So this is really important, right? If you have ownership involvement too early, you know, this can lead to problems, you know? So everybody's aligned right from the onset. Great. The contractor is going to declare the project's ready for review. What does that look like? Well, probably, you know, the contractor, if they're the right contractor, has their own process for deficiencies. They've done multiple deficiency walkarounds themselves. And only when the project is actually finalized and dialed in, great. Only then are they reaching out and saying, we're ready. Like the project is actually complete, or quote unquote, substantially complete, meaning complete pending final walkarounds. We're ready. This can be a major issue on the contractor end if they go too early and they're like, we're totally ready. They're trying to move on to the next project. And I'm sure you've experienced this. Well, we're done, we're good. We're heading off site. We're like, whoa, wait a second here. And then you actually, you know, they're saying we're complete, we're moving on. And then you or somebody else goes on site and be like, no, like that's not the case, right? So incredibly important in the first stage that they are taking their time, and this is on the contractor, and this is part of the communication process to ensure they declare the project's ready for completion, and it is, in fact, ready for the next steps, right? So that's step one. Step two is an ownership walkthrough. Now, this is a step that can be optional. It's certainly a point that can be optional. Why? It depends on what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a building that has a lot of tenants or owners, so strata is a great example of this, but it can happen on commercial as well, right? If you have that situation, you may want to get the ownership involved at this stage to come in and do their own individual walk around of their specific unit. They want to have their word. They want to have their say had, especially if they weren't involved in the process, right? So getting them involved there is a key period right now. Now, how do you want to go through this process to ensure it doesn't become an absolute mess? Well, for one thing, you want to set specific timeframes on this. So if ownership is getting involved in this, if it's relevant, give them a time frame. This could be, it's dependent on the project, but probably around a week in terms of time for there to be responses, for there to be alignment. There needs to be a clear communication process for how they're going to submit things with regards to this. And then they do so, right? And that gets addressed by the contractor if relevant, right? So that step is a crucial one if you have a large ownership group, right? If there's probably just one person, maybe it's not relevant, right? But certainly an important step in the process on some projects. Next, the actual final inspection. So you're there, the contractors declared things are ready to go. Ownership walkthrough has happened, perhaps, right, if it's relevant. Now we're moving towards the final inspection itself. This, again, just like the project tender meeting, just like the pre-production meeting, is a meeting on site, in person, with all stakeholders, right? Incredibly important. Why? Because this is the time where you've done those other meetings, you've gone through the process. Now you're all meeting in person, and you're going through and doing a walk around. This is a physical walk around on site. You know, ideally at this point, if you have the right contractor, doesn't always go perfectly, or there's been a problem. Ideally at this point, this is more of a reveal than anything else, right? There's very few deficiencies or issues, and this is just a reveal to be like, hey, this is a behold moment. You're putting everything out there, you're saying, great, have a look, right? However, you know, it's also a time to say, hey, if there's any deficiencies that are being caught, this is the time to document those. And we got actually a tool we'll point to in the next moment that you can leverage. But this is the moment to document any deficiencies, any other issues that need to be addressed, right? And have a clear time frame and plan to address them, right? This is the time, right? Is this final inspection. And you're also moving towards the demobilization at this point. You're talking about that and what that looks like as next steps, right? But that the key piece here is that should happen in person, on site, with all stakeholders, right? That's really important. Bit of a tool that can be leveraged, the job close form. Again, you'll receive this, right? So what this looks like, you know, this is something that just provides, you know, for potential deficiencies, any other project completion documents. And in the same way, you can use and abuse this, adapt it for your own needs as you're moving towards project completion. You know, you can take this and be like, okay, what's relevant to this project? Potentially use AI, right? Kind of pulling back to that. And you have a document now that you can provide to a contractor or use yourself that can be leveraged for an effective project close, right? To make sure it's dealt with right. Coming out of this, it's like, okay, great. What are our next steps? Are there deficiencies? When are they going to be addressed? Fantastic, right? What other next steps are there? What are the sign-offs are required? Ensure those happen, and you're off to the races. You know, the project is moving toward completion. And finally, the demobilization, right? So the demobilization is, of course, when there's going to be final cleanups. And it depends on the level and scale of the project, but any final cleanups that need to happen, right? Equipment getting pulled off of site, and any other factors that need to be addressed to ensure the project is dealt with effectively, right? I'm sure many of you have experienced where there isn't really a demo, but it's kind of just the contractors disappear and the project is left messy. It's left with equipment maybe on site, right? And again, clear communication to ensure that does not happen, right? And that at the final inspection stage, that's when you can ensure, hey, what does demobilization look like to ensure we have success there? And those are the 4 steps, right? Those are the 4 steps. Now, you've done everything right. You've had that project tender meeting. you know, and you feel like you've picked the right contractor. You've done the pre-production meeting ahead of time. It's gone well. You've even tried to go through these steps, but something has gone sideways, and it happens. I gave you an example of the lead up where things do not go well. What do you do, right? What do you do if the project has gone sideways? Any thoughts on that before we talk about it? Any thoughts on like, oh man, this has just gone sideways on us? Like, what can you do to bring it back on track? Any thoughts?
Light it on fire and claim insurance.
Oh, okay. You know what? Light it on fire and claim insurance for those on Zoom. That's gold. That's gold. I love it. Well, that's an option. Yeah, that's an option, but not what we're thinking overall. There's a few different approaches to this. There's no, one correct answer. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Falling back on the forms and checklists that you used along the way.
Yeah, definitely. Be able to leverage those effectively, circle back. If you've done these steps, you can very clearly prove, like, wait a second, as you can see by this communication, this is not aligned, right? So, yep, that's great. Anything else people would do? All right. The one other thing I'll say, and it's gonna be a similar thread, is just get everybody back to site, right? For a meeting and clear agenda to address the issue. Right. So I had that real world example where that happened. And I'm like, you know what? We just need to meet in person to address this. And I know some of you might be thinking, oh man, it's a lot of meetings on site. Like, there's a lot of in-person stuff. I've got a million emails. I've got a million other things to address, right? Like, this is not ideal, but it is really the answer. If the project requires it, right? The scale, the complexity, the size, this is the way to address it every time. Just get on site with all the stakeholders. Say, hey, okay, let's address this, right? This is the issue. What is our path? What is our plan? And coming out of that, there's alignment. You're all on the same page. It's documented, clearly communicated, and away you go, right? It really is, at the end of the day, one of the only ways that you can make sure that a project gets back on track if all else fails. So that's it. All right, a little review. Super high level, kind of lightning round in terms of a high level review here. So the preparation piece, 2 meetings, if there's nothing else you do in the lead up to a project. And like I said, these are 2 totally separate even presentations, which you can really dive into. But 1, project tender meeting, have one, go through the process. We provided some tools to help you on that, but go through, that's going to set you up for success. 2, have a pre-production meeting. Make sure you do that to ensure that the project is dialed in. There's good alignment before the project even starts. Really important steps. Right? Next, the project closeout process, the 4 steps that we laid out, right? Go through those. You'll get a copy of the decks. You'll see all those pieces. Go through those stages. And if all else fails, everything goes sideways, have that meeting on site, right? To get things back on track. All right, on to Q&A, and I'll pass it back to Stephen.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Hunter. Okay. Any questions? I know that was a lot. It's yeah, like I said, it's kind of drinking water from a fire hose. There was a thought I had actually lingering about the question we had from the lady sitting in the front. The example Heinrich had used, that was a totally new owner stakeholder that showed their face at the very end of the project. When we're saying owners getting involved too early, let's say, for example, you're going throughout the process of a project, there is an owner that's clearly identified themselves as a stakeholder. Then towards the end, if they're getting involved too early, i.e., hey, like, there's still little things about this project that still need to be completed. We've also seen it where then those owners come on site and they'll start pointing at everything and be like, well, that's not done, that's not done, that's not done. You're like, well, just pump the brakes because we're not done. So just, yeah, that's what we mean by getting too early. But yeah, really good question.
Yeah, well, and just to double tap on that, and hopefully I can be heard. Maybe I'll go like this. But just to sort of like dive in on that, one of the key things that I spoke to, but to reiterate, having, from an ownership standpoint, having a key representative that is empowered to make decisions is really important on these meetings. You want to talk about stakeholders, and we've probably experienced this. If there's 2 of you or 3 of you that are all vying and all have different information, that's going to lead to issues. There's just no doubt about it, right? So having that one key person that's responsible, it's the same on every end. It's the same on the contractor end too. You know, and you've probably dealt with this. If you're dealing with a contractor, you're like, wait, who am I dealing with here? I've got a project manager, I've got this on-site person, I've got this person, like who am I dealing with? It leads to problems. There's one major contact who is the decision maker, who is the point of contact and the liaison that makes all the difference, right? And in this situation, it didn't happen. We had somebody coming involved after the fact, and that led to things going a bit sideways.
Great question, though. Any other questions? I know what happens. You eat and then you sit, and it's like I could easily just fall asleep right now. So no worries. I've been in your seat more times than I can count. But so just in terms of next steps, and I think Chris is going to come up, he'll do kind of a close, but yeah, in terms of next steps, I mean, in terms of the resources we went through, we are going to be sending that. I'm going to be distributing that through Kiyomi and Logan. So they're going to send that to you. It's very simple. It's a landing page. You just enter your name. It'll be sent directly to your email. And then that's going to include all the documents that we went through, but it's also going to include a recording of the session, and it's going to include the slide deck in case there's anything you guys wanted to revisit. And in addition to that, I mean, questions are probably going to come up afterwards. So I would hope that you guys, you know, feel free to reach out to us because we'd love to answer those questions. And yeah, I mean, projects, if you know, as we were talking to our services, if a light bulb went off, you're like, oh, I think these guys would be great for that. Obviously, we would love to work with some of you and continue partnerships with others that are in the room for sure. And then additionally, what I would say, we spoke to part 1 and part 2 of this series, and even this one, you know, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, wow, this would really benefit my office from having these guys come in. We've done countless lunch and learns over the course of the last year. So if that is of interest, we're more than happy to come in, present to your office and provide a great lunch as well. So, but apart from that, guys, just to reiterate, thank you so much to the BOMA team for having us and you guys for attending. We really appreciated your time. Yeah.
We'll be hanging out up here as well. So
Yeah.
any questions coming up?